Okay, so the third theme that we're gonna kind of cover from your 25 lessons in 25 years is personal growth. And so your first sort of lesson on personal growth is to read one book a week. Now, that might be applicable to you, but for a normal person, what one book would you recommend for somebody starting a career in finance, somebody in their kind of mid-level seniority in finance, and somebody who's, a senior banker?
That's a very good question. I mean, first to address the point about reading a book a week, what I would say is that there actually is enough time in the day to get through a book a week because
Tell us your life hack.
so the thing is there's, maybe half an hour in the morning, the 1 hour straight after work, an hour, just before bed. That's like 2 hours a day of reading. And then across a week and on a weekend, you could maybe spend 4 hours a day. You could almost get through a book. And if you then think about the amount of hours you spend reading versus the amount of hours you spend looking at TikTok or watching Netflix, you'll realize that if you just halve the amount of screen time you use and read a book, you can actually get through quite a lot of books. Now, one book a week may be too aggressive, and I certainly don't always do that. Recently, I haven't. But setting yourself some target, I think, is quite healthy. And the reason I encourage people to read books is because a book has such a deep repository of knowledge that other things don't have. Like a TikTok video won't have that, or an article won't have that, or a blog won't have that. Someone's put a huge amount of work in that, and you're able to get this hack of someone's life experience in that book. Really, really powerful. Now, in terms of books to read, I would say that early on, I think that it depends, on your disposition. But early on, I think that the books you need to read often, I think, are more technical in nature. I think it's really important to understand your area really, really well. So it's kind of more sort of technical rather than philosophical per se. So, for me, I think some of the Nassim Taleb books are very good. In the sense that they have quite a nice balance between some sort of technical aspects of how markets operate. So you learn about how markets don't behave as efficiently as thinks, and is written very well. Also. So I think that's a really kind of good book.
Which one in particular, though?
Well, I think it depends what age you are. Like I was around early on when he wrote Fool by Randomness, which really sort of sticks in my mind. But I think Black Swans and Anti-Fragility both are very, very good.
Okay.
I'd say those two.
Oh, you didn't name my favorite one. Skin in the Game.
Yeah, that's the most recent one. Yeah. So I mean, they're all really good, and you can reread them, read chapters, within the books as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's very good. I think Mandelbrot's Misbehavior of Markets is very good. So I think that's worth reading. So I think those are some of the books early on in your career. So it's a bit more grounded, a bit more kind of in the weeds. You kind of feel like you've got something, and then you go to work and, understand, apply it a bit. Then as you go later on, I think that because I took on some management roles, I think in finance in particular, most people are terrible managers. And so getting a good management book is very helpful. And the book I found the best was Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive, which is probably, it was written, I think, in the 60s or something. It's the book I always go back to when I try to understand how to manage organizations, teams, and so on. And the key thing there is that his whole point is that you need to manage for effectiveness, not for efficiency. And too often organizations try to say, let's become more efficient at something, but it may be the wrong thing to do. So you're becoming good at something, which is the wrong thing. So you're becoming more efficient to flying to Beijing, where your objective is to fly to LA. So it doesn't matter how efficient you are to get to Beijing, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah,
makes sense. To be in LA. And so his whole thing is you've got to work at effectiveness, which for him is like doing the right thing first, what that is. So that's a very good book. Then later on, I think it's important to become a bit more philosophical and self-reflective. And so you need to look a bit more inwards. And that also couples with the transition in your own career and life as well. As you get older, become more mature, that you need to start to become wiser. So you need to move away from just being repository of knowledge, information, to becoming wise. Wise, being able to discern when to impart that knowledge to other people, and also to help others as well. And so for that, I think that you have to go back to some spiritual books of some kind. For me, I find that Dao De Jing, Lao Tzu's Dao De Jing, very good because that doesn't have a lot of the architecture of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Jew, which can trigger people in different ways.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, a lot of institutional baggage that there's, and it's in some ways it's quite modern in many ways. I think that's a very sort of good book to lean on. Then another good book would be that's a bit more contemporary would be, for example, works of say Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And what that does well is that it allows you to kind of move out of the noise around you and to move a bit more inward.
Mhm.
And that sort of transition is very important. So when you're able to make that transition, then it allows you to then work and operate from a space that's not contaminated
Mhm.
by all your emotional baggage. And
Yeah.
then you can use that then as a basis to be a bit more helpful and loving to everyone around you.
To go back to the conversation about being effective versus being efficient. So talk me through that. Was there a time when you were kind of working more towards the efficient side and realized it wasn't actually quite effective, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it still happens to this day, to be
Mhm.
honest. So it's very easy at your work to confuse busyness with work value add, you could say.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like if you're doing something, at least you're doing something,
Yeah, yeah.
you're occupying your day.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you spend an hour doing seemingly nothing, that seems like a waste. So there's always this bias then to just busy yourself in something.
Mhm.
And then when I look back at my career, I look at the things that really made a big difference. And a lot of that had nothing to do with that busyness.
Mhm.
Some of them were to do with really big product breakthroughs I had, which was less to do with that business and more to do with making connections in a way that were very smart. And
Mhm.
that's a product breakthrough. It may well have been certain connections I made with certain people that made a difference. But then I look at all the stuff I did in between, whether it was attending too many meetings,
Yeah.
pointless meetings or traveling too much, where I felt like if I'm traveling, I'm somehow doing my job better. But the
Yeah.
amount of time you take out to travel and you think, is it really worth it? When I look back at my career, was it really worth me doing all of that travel? It's unclear. So I think that, for a lot of my career, when I look back now, I realize that there's been a lot of like efficient work or busy work rather
Mhm.
than effective work. It became probably most clear to me probably after the global financial crisis onwards, because that in some ways in my career, that's kind of the breaking point in between where everything unraveled
Mhm.
and it forced you to reevaluate everything. And so for me, that started to make me think about what else can I do outside of finance,
Mhm.
number one. So it focuses your mind. And then the other parts were when I left the bank and suddenly when I was at Deutsche, left Deutsche to go to Nomura. When you leave a bank, you suddenly lose all that institutional knowledge that you had and buying that you had. You move to another organization, then you suddenly think, what exactly am I transferring over to the new
Yeah.
organization? So all this stuff I did there, what was it that's transferable? And you
Yeah.
realize a lot of it wasn't. And then it forces you to become much more focused on, okay, what is it that I really bring value to?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's often these transition points, or often some kind of crisis that hits your industry or yourself
Yeah.
or changing institution. And then you really start to work out actually, what is it that I was doing that made a difference?
Definitely. Definitely. And then just to kind of go back to the kind of the overarching principle of kind of personal growth, do you have a guide or a mantra that you kind of stick with for personal growth? So for example, for me, it's somebody once told me like we rise by lifting others. And like that really resonated with me. And I've tried to kind of stick to that. Is there a guideline and principle for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few, but one I'd probably think it's understated is listening, like truly listening to others.
Hmm.
Because I think what happens when the nature of finance is such that it's quite fast paced and it encourages almost like attention deficit disorder in some
Definitely.
ways. You can't stay still for 5 minutes before
Yeah.
switching to like check something or check the screens or something.
Yeah.
And that follows through to your conversation with people. So when you talk to somebody, they're saying something and you're not really listening
Mhm.
often half the time. You know, you're thinking about your next thought, or you're just using them as an audience to your
Yeah. Or you even like try to finish their sentences as well. 'Cause you're
Yeah.
like, come on, move this along.
Yeah. But to truly listen to somebody, what that means is that you have to reduce the noise of yourself, which is a practice in itself.
Mhm.
Really listen to what the person is saying, which means not only understanding the words, because obviously the words have a certain level of meaning, but there's other things around that. You know, what's the emotion behind the words? You know, somebody could say a certain set of words. They could say in an angry way. They could say in a happy way,
Mhm.
passive aggressive way, or other sorts of ways. What's their body language? Are they
Mhm.
tense or not? So you have to kind of really assess all of these different things to get the full kind of picture of what they're
Mhm.
saying. And then also, if you're really listening to them, you get new insights. Because sometimes what happens when you're listening to somebody, all you're doing is you're just trying to hurry them along to confirm something you already know.
Yeah.
Like, I already know that. But if you really listen, you're hearing something kind of new.
Mhm.
It's like a revelation in that moment. And so I think that for me is probably the most important thing, because behind listening well, there's a whole set of other things you need to do to do that. And then you could apply that to markets then as well. Am I listening to markets well or not? Or am I just projecting my own biases onto the markets? You know, are you picking up the right signals or not?
No, I think that's a great one. That's all on personal growth for today.